Hey everybody, welcome back to the Combo Couch. I am Fiorella and I am here solo today, as tomorrow I will not be in house, but make sure to catch Pasta with Kim Iverson doing a little bit of talking on that pill, and also co-hosting. She'll be co-hosting. So make sure to check that out. Klaus is doing an interview in Sputnik right now. I'm not exactly sure who or what, but he's doing something. So I wanted to really quickly come up because I will be on with Misty Winston at 5 o'clock on her show at TNT Radio to talk about whatever we're going to talk about. So I wanted to really just quickly talk about Madeleine Albright because she's everybody's favorite woman, Secretary of State. She was the first Secretary of State for the United States and the female Secretary of State, right? So we should all be very proud. And when I talk about feminism, or when a lot of anti-imperialists have issues with feminism in the United States, it's because of that whole intersectional imperialism that constantly is pushed out there by the establishment. And we're seeing it now more with the Squad. They're, intersectional sort of imperialist agenda where they pretty much talk about Medicare for all, talk about caring about other people. But when it comes down to it, they take turns voting for imperialist policies. And also, of course, they don't really oppose the oligarchy or the empire in any valid way that has any sort of strength in it. So it's kind of reminiscent of where we're at. You saw a bunch of people giving Madeleine Albright all these like accolades. You had a bunch of people talking about how she was amazing. The most used word was a trailblazer for a lot of women. And you'll have people on the left making excuses that this means that, even though she was horrible, the fact is she led the way for other women to have these jobs. So why do I want more women to be warmongers and to be imperialists? It's not really what I want as a human being, as for representation. But the identity politics that the liberals and a lot of the progressive left have taken into kind of just pretends that doesn't matter, that somehow representation is equal to action. And it's not. And it's not, because when I went to Nicaragua, women there are paid the same amount as men, and we don't even have that here. Yet you have all these women screaming about female empowerment and all this bullshit without it actually meaning anything. So her death, a lot of people say, you're not supposed to be happy when people die. But of course, in this case, I think people react differently, and I don't think we should impede people from reacting the way they do. But I think in this case, above all, this is some of what a happy moment for a lot of people who have suffered the consequences of her foreign policy. And a lot of us anti-imperialists do have the right to celebrate. And I don't care if you get mad that we're celebrating, because at the end of the day, nobody outside the United States sees this person, or the West in general, sees this person as a positive figure. She was the foreign policy lead that led to the death of thousands of Iraqi children, if not close. Eventually, right, that number gets bigger and bigger and bigger to millions. And this is from CNN Politics. They basically just released a statement saying that Madeleine Albright, the first female U.S. Secretary of State, died yesterday. And she was, of course, the one that took over foreign policy after the Cold War. And she died at 84 years old of cancer. Now, let's remember the most memorable thing about her was this interview with Leslie Stahl in 60 Minutes in 1996, right? And of course, a lot of us weren't even, were very young, or not, a lot of people weren't even born then. So maybe a lot of even younger people don't even know this particular thing. But in May of 1986, Madeleine Albright, who was then the U.S. ambassador to the UN, was asked by Leslie Stahl of 60 Minutes in reference to years of U.S.-led economic sanctions against Iraq. Leslie Stahl said, "We have heard that 500,000 children have died. I mean, that is more children than died in Hiroshima. And, is the price worth it? She was talking about the foreign policy. Madeleine Albright answered, I think that is a very hard choice, but the price, we think the price is worth it. And when you're talking about warmongers and they're valuing, equating 6 million dead Iraqi children to the price being worth it, they're talking about the price of US hegemony, the price of imperialism. It didn't make us any safer. It didn't stop some sort of quote terrorist takeover. It didn't do anything for the average American, but for the people in West Asia, what we call the Middle East, it destroyed families, it destroyed generations, it obliterated from the map people that should have been alive, kids that should have grown up to have been alive, to get married, to have other children. And we do that all the time. We do it 24/7, every other week. We have given weapons to Israel that continues to use them against Palestinians. The vast majority of Palestinians that are left are women and children because the men have all been killed. And you have that going on. You have the Afghani people that are dying because of the US sanctions, particularly children. Once again, you have the Syrian people that we attempted to throw another regime change after years and years of destroying their country and fabricated these chemical weapon attacks in order to do it. We have Libya. Who can forget Libya? Who can forget Somalia? Who can forget all of the foreign policy that other women like Madeleine Albright, namely Hillary Clinton, who she was a staunch advocate for during the presidency, pushed for? And so one of the people that interviewed her, instead of being, and this is a supposed journalist who I consider a propagandist, right? Instead of being adversarial, instead of really pushing back and saying, hey, are you going to take back your statement about the Iraqi children? Are you going to do something to correct the record? How do you feel about your legacy of imperialism? Instead of asking those tough questions, she gave her a very, very bootlicking type of just milk toast, if even that, interview. And that was Anna Kasparian. So here's Anna Kasparian's best interview of Madeleine Albright from the gates of hell.
Welcome to your MSC. I am delighted to be here and to have a conversation with the former U.S. Secretary of State under Bill Clinton, Madeleine Albright. Madeleine Albright was actually the first female Secretary of State in the U.S., and it is a pleasure to have you here. It's an honor to have a conversation with you.
Well, I'm delighted to be interviewed by you. Thank you very much. I didn't say that.
Mm-hmm.
I have to tell you, I have forever been saying that there's a special place in hell for women who don't help each other.
Right.
Therefore, I was looking at Hillary and I said, there's a special place in hell.
Secretary Albright, it's a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much for being here. And I want to encourage all of you to also take part in this conversation by commenting in the comment section below.
So, yeah, there's a special place in hell. And, a lot of people would say, may she rest in hell, may she rest in whatever. And I'm not one to actually do that usually, but I find the world a better place when there's one less warmonger. And of course, a lot of people are saying, where the hell is Henry Kissinger? Because this is ridiculous. The guy is like 80 something years old, 84. I think he's older than her. And he's so well and alive. And of course, there's a lot of warmongers roaming free. You have Barack Obama, you have George W. Bush doing little paintings like a 6-year-old and being coddled by all of the media. You have a bunch of these people that have committed so many atrocities and crimes being lauded and being hailed, like resurrected. And in so many ways. And yet, of course, and now you have Zelensky, who is literally like allowing neo-Nazis to take over his government, who completely just is an oligarch, who is sending Ukrainian people just down into death and destruction and allowing NATO and the West to do whatever they want because it benefits him and because he's protected by them. So you have this guy being, named for nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize. And then, of course, you have Anthony Fauci, who led one of the most important positions in government right now during the pandemic. And he's just he's going to retire because a lot of people hate him. So he doesn't want to be investigated. You have Joe Biden, the president of the United States. I could go on and on and on with all the people you have, and a lot of them are rehabilitated in media in order to oppose the next boogeyman. It was Trump before, now it's Vladimir Putin. So it just shows you the hypocrisy of where we're at. And I wanted to also quickly mention something that happened today in terms of the things we were talking about yesterday with the dollar sinking further, and of course how this is going to affect people here. And I can't stop talking about that because I don't think people realize how bad it is and how it's going to affect them. After Putin announced on Wednesday that countries, especially referencing the European countries who, according to him, really just like screwed their currency, for lack of a better word, and he said that they must pay for gas in Russian rubles, the currency is now up by 10%. So now the ruble is going up, and the sanctions that these European countries have imposed on Russia are will affect them and have affected them. But now they're seeing a little bit of resurgence because they have other markets, as I've said, and they of course have China as well. And another important thing that they did was suggest that they will accept Bitcoin payments of oil and gas. And they specifically said, when it comes to our friendly countries like China or Turkey, which don't pressure us, then we have been offering them for a while to switch payments to national currencies like rubles and yuan. So they're also accepting the yuan. And Salvani said this during a press conference. And he also said with Turkey, it can be lira and ruble. So there can be a variety of currencies. And that's a standard practice. If they want Bitcoin, we will trade in Bitcoin. So in order to get gas and oil, they're asking for the non-friendly countries to use rubles. But for the friendly countries, they'll allow them to use their currencies, but also Bitcoin. So that is a potential big thing, not for like Bitcoin itself only, but for the people in general. If the Russian government is accepting Bitcoin at a national level, then perhaps they will allow Bitcoin use more like more quickly through the country, and allow it to, just sort of be another currency. And I think that's important, especially when you're facing sanctions, as we've talked about it on the show before. Other countries that have been sanctioned by the United States have used cryptocurrencies to go around the sanctions, which has helped many people. Places like Venezuela are one that comes to mind. So that is essentially one of the biggest news of the day. It really shows you that compared to if you search right now, if you go on Google and you search rubles, all you'll find is that the ruble is sinking, that the ruble is doing terrible, that the Russian economy is tanking, that the Russians are leaving in droves and they're exiting Russia, that it's so bad and people hate Putin. But if you actually listen to non-Western media, what you'll be understanding and actually hearing is the complete opposite. You'll be seeing that, yes, well, sanctions do hurt an economy like Russia's has been prepping for sanctions. They've been prepping and dealing with attacks from the West, and they have become a little bit more independent and self-sufficient. And of course, now with partners in India and China and beyond, then it's going to affect them less in the long run. Meanwhile, here in the United States, like I said, we're facing food scarcity. We're facing high gas prices, high inflation, and not just here in the United States, but also in the West, with highly dependent countries like Germany and France being extremely affected by this whole situation. And it's not at all like the media is painting it. Russia right now, reports were today that the Donetsk People's Republic did capture Mariupol. So that is another big major story happening. And, we'll be back next week and perhaps we'll talk a little bit more about it tomorrow. But I wanted to talk too about this very important video that Wyatt, my friend who works for Sputnik, put out. This is a video that basically shows how there are people crazy enough to take us into nuclear war. Now, I don't think we're going to get there because of the pushback from a lot of people, including even the Biden administration. But there are people within that administration that are crazy enough. There are people within NATO that are crazy enough. NATO is an extension of the global military of the West. It's that nothing more than an extension of our military empire. And so there are people that are crazy enough to take us into war. I discussed this with Jesse Zerwell earlier today on TNT Radio, where is it going to be a nuclear attack or is it going to be a biochemical attack? And I lean more towards a biochemical attack based on what Victoria Nuland said with Marco Rubio, that exchange, blaming Russia already for anything that happens, while they're the ones that were funding these biolabs in Ukraine, and how Hunter Biden is now implicated in that, of course. And we've talked about Burisma with Hunter Biden, and we've talked about how the New York Times finally admitted that the laptop story and all of that was real. But there's a reason why they're admitting it. They're admitting it because they have a plan as to how to wipe their hands clean. And if they have to throw Joe Biden in there as the sacrificial lamb, they're going to do it. So now Joe Biden has to respond to why Hunter Biden was involved in this. And that's something that I think is only happening because they have a plan. And so when we're looking at this potential either nuclear or biochemical attack, I lean towards a biochemical one because of what was spoken, but also because biological warfare is extremely effective. We've seen the false flag, what happened under the Syrian chemical attacks in Douma, and how that was pushed in mainstream media using, once again, children and civilians to falsify this attack, and the extent that the West and the quote, moderate rebels, and which are, the white helmets, how they were able to produce this sort of movie-like thing where they were able to create this idea that they happened, even though we know now that the OPCW really debunked the whole thing, right? And you still have people calling anybody that says otherwise a sadist, paid by the Syrian government, etc. So this gentleman, he is the British Defense Secretary Wallace, and he was talking with a soldier. He was talking with somebody about nuclear ambitions from Ukraine, and he thought it was a prankster, but it's believed to be the Ukrainian PM, So it was a prankster, but he believed it was a Ukrainian prime minister. So it's funny because one, he's an idiot, and two, he got exposed. And these people do this all the time. They expose themselves in ways, which is why I think more and more people are catching on. So the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine demands that YouTube take this down. So I suggest if you go on Wyatt's Twitter, save the video, because I have a feeling it won't be up forever. And they're calling it Russian propaganda. They're saying it's fake, and they're saying it's a threat to UK national security. So it's funny because it implicates both Ukraine and the UK, right? Because this is the British Defense Secretary Wallace of the UK talking to who he thinks is the Ukrainian prime minister. So let's go ahead and listen to the audio, and then I'll go over it.
I understand that you are probably fed up with this question, but I would like to ask, how else can the UK support us in this difficult time for you?
I can't say where I've been, but I've just been to look at more of our anti-air capacity to give you, and making sure that we are getting it into the country as quickly as possible.
Oh, I mean, of course, we are currently discussing the idea of a defensive alliance with a country with a nuclear weapon, and it would be great if the UK became such a country. So how do you feel about the idea of union between our countries? And for example, it was wonderful to open official British training centers in our country.
Well, look, I think we are very keen to support you in any negotiations, and I know my understanding is President Zelensky is quite keen to see the United Kingdom alongside Ukraine in these negotiations because of the experience that we didn't have, but the bad experience of the Minsk agreement where just France and Germany were there, and I think there is a desire for the UK and the US, and I think all of those subjects, including a security alliance, I think is something to discuss with you on those negotiations.
There's another video under that thread that I'd like to play if you go to the link I provided. But really quickly, the main point of that was that they are putting nuclear war on the table, and he has no problem saying that. He talks about how keen they are in going that route. It's extremely dangerous to have somebody that is a part of the West saying that nuclear arms are on the table. When Russia said it, they said it in retraction to that. They said, well, if the United States is putting this out there, and if the West is doing, yes, we're going, like, of course. But they had so much criticism, but these people are freely advocating for that. And it's to me, it is so psychopathic, because they don't care about the consequences, about what that means, using nuclear arms. I mean, it means the destruction, a lot of innocent people dying, the economy's tanking. And that's one other aspect of this, the Great Reset, the tanking of the economies, that is a part of it. They don't care, because the next thing is for a new economy to start, to begin, and to be for the people to be highly dependent on this new economy that's going to be structured with how they want it structured. So that's the only reason why I think that there's still a possibility for some psychopath to come in and say, okay, well, we don't care. We're gonna get this. Why? Because the United States and the West are so dependent on winning this conflict. It's not a war, essentially. It's a proxy war via Ukraine, but they know that they're losing grip on the unilateral position that they've had. So if they don't win this, it's kind of like the end. And I think they're starting to realize that. So that's why you see the screams of the empire louder and louder, get louder and louder. So the next video, I'm just gonna surmise what it says before I play it. So Wallace is promising new anti-aircraft systems and is taking a shot at France and Germany. And then the UK Defense Secretary Wallace also seems to be unsure as to whether or not the Ukrainian Prime Minister, who is not the Ukrainian Prime Minister, realizes a no-fly zone would likely do the regime more harm than good. So let's go ahead and play the second video.
Is it possible to somehow make the NATO ban on non-interference and do something to close the sky for Russian aircraft?
Two things. I've just been looking at our new anti-air missile that we're sending you, which is better than Stinger. It'll work at night. It's a very, very fast missile, and it will help close the skies to Russian aircraft.
Yes.
I think what I would like to understand from Ukraine is, given that Russia has overwhelming amounts of artillery and missiles, and one of the few areas that Ukraine has a military ability to hit those missiles and artillery is using air and Bayraktar-2s, how would you deal with not being able to fly? Because a no-fly zone would be for both sides.
Is it possible to somehow make the NATO ban?
Okay, so they're discussing the no-fly zone. They're talking about how it's like he's kind of like fishing, like, what, are you okay with this? Are you, do you know what this means? And just to surmise like that, because he has a lot of videos. On the next one, he says that they're not going to directly attack the Russian ships or airplanes. That's what Wallace says. At this stage, though, it's a difficult thing for me to say, but but they're promising, of course, more weapons to Ukraine to help them. And then they have he says, we have always wanted you to join NATO, which is why our training teams were there. Over the last 5 years, UK Defense Minister tells pretend Ukrainian Prime Minister he blames other NATO nations for failure to secure Ukraine's membership. So by saying that they always wanted Ukraine to join NATO, they're admitting that they're willingly. This is about that Russia wasn't making it up. Putin had a reason to go into this intervention because Ukraine joining NATO was literally not allowed. And they've been working on making that happen. And the reason it wasn't allowed is because they were supposed to be a neutral state, and that was part of this treaty. And they completely violated that, and NATO has continued expanding eastward. So they can no longer say that they didn't do anything wrong, that this was unprovoked, is what they've been saying. And so I encourage people to check that out, because he then asks the Prime Minister, the phony Ukrainian Prime Minister, asked him for help with nuclear weapons, and the Defense Secretary says, we will support Ukraine if they want to explore new weapons. So there are people like this guy that are willing to go to the extreme to make sure that they have control of Eurasia and this region and the pipeline. So it's extremely precarious situation. I don't think that these people can just act alone. But at the same time, I definitely see that there are people that are extremely hungry for war. They're insane. They're psychopathic. They don't care about the consequences as long as they win this battle. And of course, as I talked about yesterday, the manufacturers, the defense contractors are making a ton of money by selling weapons to European nations that are being used, of course, to support Ukraine as well. The military budget for this year was ridiculous. It was much more than last year, and it keeps increasing every time. And this is where we're at here in this conflict. And meanwhile, Russia has the upper hand. Russia is going to destroy anything that's in its territory because, first of all, it's its backyard. Military-wise, territory-wise, they have the upper hand. And then, of course, their army is ridiculously huge. And the United States would make a drastic mistake in getting involved. But when you think about it in terms of the Great Reset and the global aspect, then you can understand that these people are crazy enough to allow that to happen, to allow the economy to sink, to allow Americans to actually suffer a lot this time because they want to reset everything. They want the economy to become this economy where you are dependent on it, where you are constantly surveilled, where any sort of UBI that's given to you must be spent a certain way. You can't just go and buy yourself whatever you want with this UBI. Those are going to be caveats. For a lot of the progressives who are so hyper-focused right now on the nomination of the Supreme Court justice, that really doesn't stop the fact that we have people nominated for life. That shouldn't be a thing anyway. We live in an empire, so there is no justice. And also this person is supported by the police, which is, I guess, irrelevant if they're a Black woman. Like that's what's being discussed right now by the boutique left, the synthetic left, the morons that constantly hyper focus on, how evil Republicans are, but are okay by putting a Ukrainian flag on their profile picture and supporting neo-Nazis, the Azov battalion, the people that are left that are in charge of the Ukrainian army, the defense, there's a segment of the Ukrainian army that's literally just the Azov battalion. And it's insane. It's like they're the equivalent of their Navy. Is the entirety of it is made up of the Azov battalion. So that's the conflicts that are happening, and I just wanted to talk about that because I think it's important that people understand that there are people in power right now that are crazy enough to push nuclear war, to push for a biochemical false flag. And I believe the false flag one is more likely because it's easier to manufacture. They've sort of set it up already, and I definitely think that it's coming. But I wanted to thank you guys for sticking with my short rant and watching. I only see one Super Ray Oz. I don't, let me see. Trey Wright, thank you so much for your continuous support. I love you very much for being a loyal fan. I hope you guys enjoy this. Please like, share, and spread it everywhere, and subscribe, and also catch me on with Misty shortly. I will be on her show, radio. It's just audio, but I'll be talking more about this stuff actually. And yeah, I'll see you guys tomorrow on the Combo Couch at 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 Pacific. Combo out. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. See you then. Bye.